with some of the applications we've been presenting back to our agencies. And so I'm just asking very basic questions, but rest assured, we will have our Google, engineers, work with you, figure this out.
Yeah, I mean, they can easily figure it out. And everything is very well documented, step by step, exactly how to install and do everything. And so far, nobody has had any issues with installing the app. So
I have one more question, and if it's not the right time, you guys will let me know. When you do this kind of script, when you do this kind of data loading, how does that integrate with the interface in terms of like administrative privileges and verification?
So that's a separate process. So as I mentioned, the app has an admin interface. So the idea is that whoever is importing this data has access to the data. They were clear to begin with to have access to this data, and so once you upload the data, if you want to then make changes or open it up for other people to have access to it, you can do that, and that's all covered in the wiki. So if you go to the wiki, and then there's an article called Admin Interface Basics that explains exactly how the admin interface works, how you can have different sets of users. There's like regular admins, there's super admins who have access to the whole database, and you can also restrict access, and that's all explained in there. So
cool, great,
take a look at that there, yeah.
Absolutely, thank you.
Does the API support calls from remote sources for individual records at this point?
Yes, this is all. I mean, if you go to the documentation,
okay,
you can see exactly what kind of calls you can make, and yeah, so it's a JSON API.
Okay.
And yeah, and the documentation has examples for how you can make a call. Actually, you can even use the browser. You don't even have to, because it's JSON. You can just go to make any call you want directly in the browser, or you can do it from the shell using curl, or there's also Ruby examples if you want to use our API wrapper.
Okay.
If you're a Ruby developer, there's different ways to make calls, but if you just want to see what an example response looks like, you just type it in directly in the browser.
Great.
Yeah, and then you can see that you can query all locations, you can query a specific location, you can do a search with all kinds of parameters, so yeah.
I see we've just been joined by Declan. Welcome.
Hey guys, thank you.
Declan, I mentioned in the last conversation about the specification that you all have actually been deploying and using Ohana in the field.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could give us an introduction, tell us a little bit about, what's been your experience so far, and then, if you have questions, things you want to talk about while we're on the line, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry I'm a little late. I actually got confused about the time zones.
Oh.
But no, my fault. So yes, my name's Declan, and our company is Purple Binder. We are an IR vendor based in Chicago. And we have been using Ohana for, I guess it's been about a half a year now, and we're currently running 4 different deployments of it. So yeah, we love it. It's great software. Yeah, so I mean, in particular, I'm interested in talking with anyone else who's running multiple deployments and how that they've handled the challenges involved with that. And anything else that people want to talk about.
I did mention that in a previous conversation with Declan that I think that's currently what the DC pilot, the leadership here is trying to wrap their heads around, but unfortunately they weren't able to make this call. But I am interested in sort of setting up a follow-up conversation if people are specifically interested in multiple installs. But while we have Monsef on the phone, I mean, do you want to sort of share some of your thinking or any questions or challenges that you had in managing these 4 different deployments?
Sure. So I guess the big challenge for us in handling multiple deployments was a clean way to get upstream changes, right? Get the improvements that you and Ansam are making. and to roll those out to multiple different deployments. And I think it's 4 right now. That number is going to keep growing. So yeah, that was one thing that was that we had to work with. And then I guess the other big piece of it is actually Ansem isn't on the call, I don't think, but he and I did a lot of work on being able to customize the branding over the summer, and that's been really tremendously helpful. It's made it really easy to do.
That's the branding of the search interface.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the branding of the search, the web client, I think.
Cool.
Yeah, I guess I'm also just really curious, you know, to get a sense of who's using it and hear how other people are deploying it.
Yeah.
And what they've been using it for.
So unfortunately, I mean, I think the one other really active, well, the one other deployment other than DC, which wasn't able to make the call, is in Scotland, and I wasn't able to make the schedules line up. But I think they are also adapting it very specifically for youth services, and I do have some sort of screenshots from them. But nothing, nothing in the way yet of details about how they're actually managing this. But I'm looking forward to learn more about that. I think we may see other multiple deployments coming up in the UK. There's like a number of small boroughs in London that are looking into this. So yeah.
Oh, that's very cool. I don't know anything about social service delivery in the UK.
Yeah, it's as a side note, it's in a transition period. It has been mostly historically provided by the government. Services were just government focused, and over the last 5 years, with the conservative government, there's been a lot of budget cuts and sort of shifting of services to nonprofits. So they're actually in a period of transition to become more like the United States, and in that transition, I think they're grappling with it, which means a lot of people are trying to think about there's more thinking about problems like this now than I think there were a couple of years ago. So,
I see. Okay.
I'm curious if you've done or you're working with very robust updates, because that's part of our thing that we're taking a look at. You know, how agencies can update information sometimes daily. You know, because something is closed down for a week and nobody really knows about it, and that's the kind of thing that we're wanting to capture. And I'm just curious if you've used Ohana to do that kind of thing, because it's a very small subset of information.
Is that question for me?
Well, yeah, because I think you're using it, or anybody who's using it, and just if you've had that as a challenge, or if that's something that you've looked into, or if you're doing that.
Yeah, it is a challenge that we've had. Our experience has been that getting the agencies to self-report that kind of information hasn't been good enough. Some of the agencies that we worked with will do it, and some of them won't. So we have had to supplement that with our own staff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure whether we're going to be successful, but we have very broad-based institutional support through one of our partners, and we'll see if it works. But that's a goal. Everybody has identified that that's what they want to do, but maybe you're finding there's what they want to do and what they're willing to do. So we've decided to try to tackle that. I'm not quite sure how, but yeah, that's one of our goals.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using Ohana, I don't think the barriers will be technological. It certainly makes that possible if you have the buy-in that you need.
And I'm just curious where you're getting your core data from. Like here in California, I'd probably be looking at 211 data, finding out where agencies have that stored, and then using those fields as just an easy way of getting information in. And in Chicago, I'm just curious what databases, core databases you're using to get the information uploaded to Ohana.
Yeah, absolutely. So the work that we do is all for specific clients. So when we work with a client, we'll start with whatever resource lists they have. And you're correct that there's no central 211 that covers all of Chicago, but some of our clients, for example, are healthcare providers, so we'll work with the social work department at a hospital and start from their resource lists.
Gotcha. Okay.
Monsef, do you want to talk a little bit about the admin interface, especially for organizations updating their own information?
Yeah, I mean it's possible to do. It's just basically just sign in. You create an account if you don't already have one, and you get an email to allow you to confirm your email address, just to make sure that it's a real email address. And then once you're confirmed, you can sign in. And the way it works is it first tries to determine if you are a part of an organization that is in the database by looking at your email address. So if you sign up with, like you're part of the Samaritan House organization and your email address is judith@samaritanhouse.com, it'll try to find samaritanhouse.com, and it finds a match that it knows, okay, well, I'm going to give you access to these locations that belong to Samaritan House and only these. And if it doesn't find a match, or if you sign up with a Gmail address or any other generic, what we consider generic, and the list of generic email addresses can be customized, then in that case, you'll have to ask someone who's a master administrator to add you as an administrator for that particular location. Mm-hmm. Once you're made an admin, then you can yourself add other people as admins and add them that way. So, for example, in San Mateo County, everybody who works for the local government there has an SMC Gov, email address, but we wouldn't want to give them access to every single department in the county. And so in that case, these people have to ask the Human Services Agency who maintains the database to add them as an administrator. So that's how that works, in terms of differentiating who has access to what. And of course, you can customize that if you don't want to have those rules. You just need some technical expertise and know how to work with Rails and this particular plugin that we use for authorization, and you can define your own rules, but that's the one that we thought would work best for most people. And then once you are able to sign in and have access to a particular entity, then you have access to all the different, the major entities or organizations, locations, and services. But then within each, you can have contacts. An organization can have contacts. An organization can have phone numbers. So all of these different fields are you can edit, and a lot of it is customizable via this particular text file. One thing you can customize, for example, to ensure data consistency is a predefined set of values for particular fields. So, for example, there's a field called languages that defines which languages are spoken at a particular location. And so to ensure, there's two ways to do it. You could allow people to just free-form enter the language by themselves, but that could introduce inconsistencies if somebody types in Spanish with a lowercase s, or misspells it, or you can have duplicates, one with a lowercase, one with a capital letter at the beginning. And so to reduce that, you can predefine, say, okay, well, these are the languages that people can choose from, and only these. And so it's becomes a drop-down list that people can choose from. So we've already, out of the box, many of these fields are pre-populated with default values, which of course you can edit, because in some cases they might not make sense for you. So a lot of it is we try to make the whole thing very customizable and easy to customize, even if you're not, technically savvy, because it's just a text file and it's all very well documented. So it's just really a matter of reading the documentation. It's all in there. Just read through everything, and it explains how this field works, how you can customize it to suit your needs. It's pretty powerful. So
looks like we lost Judith. Let's see, Krishna, Tom, do you have questions? I mean, you're both in situations where your organizations might be in a position to consume from and/or possibly make use of the Ohana API. So do you have questions about how to actually, about what it'll take to make this operational for you?
I'm back.
Go ahead.
Hi, Judith. I was asking Christian and Tom, if they have questions about, going from 0 to 60, and whether they have what they need to actually use this.
No, I mean, I think the explanation you've given so far is reasonably clear, and that the documentation seems pretty good. We're really at a stage where we're just trying to discuss how this can, what we can do given the particular circumstances of our data and what we do with it. But I mean, I think that in terms of explanation of how we actually get on board, that's fairly clear.
Yeah. Yeah. One of our assumptions in this whole initiative is that people are going to have various ways that they're formatting their data internally to their own systems, which is natural and something we want to, we don't want to change that. We want to establish the means to move data between systems in a way that's flexible and supports that sort of variation. So, that's our hypothesis.
I have a question, and once again, not being technical, this may be answered, but one of our strategies in terms of updates does involve Google Schema, either at the form or at an email level, for these very robust updates. So I'm just wondering how you work with Google Schema, or if you do, or if that's something that we would, figure out how we would want to handle, in coordination with you. I just was wondering if, the core database, is working with Google Schema right now.
So the database itself doesn't use Google Schema, but the web search, the website where people go to search for the services, it uses the schema.org markup, which basically what it does is it tells Google what each part of the description of a location or a service corresponds to. So it'll say, well, this part refers to the address. This is the phone number. This is the email address.
Great, that's great.
That way, Google can automatically, when it crawls your website, it can extract that information, and it makes it easier to surface those in search results. So that's already built in. We haven't, looked at it recently to see if there have been any updates, but most of the important fields like address, phone numbers, contacts, I think those are all covered in there already.
It sounds great. It's more for curiosity. Are you doing any tracking of searches and user requests?
So that would be up to you, because there's a myriad of ways to install Google Analytics for your own website. So it's really on a
Yeah, no, I meant more from the perspective of, Joe called 10 times, and we know Joe's in zip code, 12345, and this is what Joe looked for last time, and we, so how many requests have we gotten by zip code? That seems to be sort of a common, analytic that the 211 systems use, for example.
Right. So I mean, we have support for Google Analytics out of the box, but it would still require you to, set up a Google Analytics account or whatever analytics tool you want to use, and it would be, up to the community that's deploying Ohana to track that data for their particular website, because each website is going to have their own visitors, their own.
Right.
But I think
I'll just jump in also, and I'll say that we did set up that kind of tracking by zip code, Tom, that you're asking about on our deployments, and it was really easy to set up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just built an extension to Ohana for that?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I think there are modules Montef was telling me about for reporting. Is that in Heroku you were saying? Or? Right.
So there's different ways to track visits to a website. Google Analytics, is a common way, and it's free, and it's pretty. It's got lots of data you can use. For other types of monitoring and analytics, if you're using Heroku, there are what they call add-ons. that you can use to track different things. But probably the easiest to start with is Google Analytics. And if you want to use Google Analytics to hook up your Google Analytics account to Ohana, all you have to do is put in your ID, your Google Analytics ID, in a text file. So it makes it very easy to integrate. You don't have to add any code yourself or anything. The code is already in there. You just need to, once you set up your account, you get an ID, and then you also have to specify the website that it's supposed to track, and then you just add those two. And this is all in the documentation.
Okay.
We had a couple of questions from someone who emailed in that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to chat this one because I don't know. So somebody asked if there's interest in defining the API using Rammel, R-A-M-L, i.e. a structured definition that could be processed into other forms.
Not current. I mean, I'm not very familiar with Rammel.
I'm
not something
not familiar with Rammel either.
Okay.
It's not something that we were planning on doing. I mean, I just looked at it briefly just now. I don't really see a need for it. I mean, the documentation explains how the API works. And for apps that would be consuming the API, I don't think they would benefit from Rammel. It wouldn't make it any easier, as far as I understand it. But if there's, if somebody wants to do it, and like if Paul wants to do it, I mean, if he thinks there's value for it, I mean, sure, why not? But
okay.
Yeah.
I think the other questions that he's asked, I can sort of take. He asked about outlining a plan to develop Ohana for international use, and I mean, I think that's sort of underway in a couple of places, but. And then he asked some questions about open eligibility, which are good ones, but probably outside of our scope here. Okay, any other questions?
I mean, I'm sure, once again, being a non-technical person, this is my technical people probably know, but what are the costs associated with using Ohana?
So, I mean, the software itself is free. It's open source. The cost would be whether you have technical experts, working for free, like in your case, it would be Google volunteers, so there wouldn't be any cost there, I guess. But in terms of deploying it, of course, there's always costs associated with that. Heroku is one of the easiest ways to deploy that, and we have instructions for that. And depending on how much traffic you get, you could start off. They have a free plan, and which doesn't have a time limit, so you can run it for free forever. But there are some limitations. So if you all of a sudden get a million users using your website, you probably want to upgrade. So the next step would become $34.50 a month.
Wow.
Actually, that's the base, just to have two what they call dynos running. But you, depending also on the size of your database, and if you want to go in a production environment with actual users and you want to make this official website, you want to at least have a production-ready database plan, which starts at $50 a month. So, so average, we're looking, actually for San Mateo County, the API is running, I think, on under $100 a month, and then so basically you would have two applications on Heroku, one for the API and the admin interface, and one for the web search. The web search doesn't have a database or anything, so that one I think is just the $34.50 plus I think something maybe for caching, so maybe another $10 or $15. So let's say like $50, and then for the API, let's say $100. So $150, I guess, would probably be more than enough for most people.
Yeah, pretty negligible given all of the functionality that you guys are offering.
All right. So I don't want to keep us longer than we need to be. And I know for Tom and Monsef, this is the second hour. Any final questions?
No. This has been fascinating. It looks great.
Just since I missed the intro, Tom, where are you looking to deploy it, and what is the technical expertise on your staff?
So we have this community platform project that we have deployed on around 20 sites around the country. I mean, I think we would primarily be consumers of the data, but I'm always interested to find good interfaces that we can learn from.
Yeah, Tom has a couple of deployments of the community platform in DC. Well, one in DC and one in Northern Virginia. And so, I'm hopeful that our sort of phase 2 of the DC pilot, once Spread for the Cities data is up, we'll be experimenting with pulling it into the community platform here in DC. And also, we discussed earlier the Albuquerque mayor's office, just waiting for the word from them to declare Albuquerque, our next pilot project. And I'm not exactly sure, which way the data is going to be flowing there. Although it sounded like Tom's community platform actually has the quality data in Albuquerque, and it's the mayor's office has an HMIS system that wants to consume it. Tom, do you have a sense of do you have questions about or does this make sense as like a component to an existing community platform system? Like in Albuquerque, if the mayor's office is like, we want to get this done, we have the resources to make it happen, are you able to deploy Ohana alongside the community platform? Does that make sense, or do you have questions about that?
I mean, honestly, in Albuquerque, I don't think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we would simply be implementing the Open Referral API, and we have already a system that is,
right.
I think has very similar capacities
okay.
to Ohana.
Right.
There may be other sites where this would be a better fit. I'm not sure at this point.
Yeah. Although, well, to clarify, Open Referral has a format, and then the Ohana API is the reference implementation
right.
API
right.
and uses the format. So, in some cases, there are going to be people who want to build their own API, and this could serve as a reference point, although, it also seems like it just helps replace, it stands in for all that labor of building an API from scratch. But I'm still wrapping my own head around how people are going to essentially augment existing systems that serve internal functionality, of making this data available in order to have a public-facing API like this. So, cool. Any final questions? Any final thoughts?
Well, it would be useful at some point just to maybe compare notes, and if it's not available, to the public, to be able to take a look at what you guys are doing in exchange for us also showing, what we're doing.
Is your question to any of us in particular?
Well, yes. I mean, I think what Health Leads and, Purple Binder is doing.
Sure, yeah, let's follow up about that after the call.
Sure, great. Thank you, guys. No more questions for me.
Great.
Other than a big thank you.
All right, thanks, y'all.
You and Greg.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Thanks, Monsef.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you
problem.
Thanks, Monica.
Bye, y'all.
Okay, bye.
All right.